Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hi, Erin.
Hey, Dorothy.
It's great to be here with everybody. And I know that we are just going to wait a few more minutes for everyone to join us. I see everyone adding where they're from in the chat. It's so great to be here with so many people from all over. I see some Florida folks. I'm also in Florida.
I see some familiar names here, some folks that I have had the opportunity to meet over time.
Awesome. So, like I said, we're still going to wait a few more minutes. I hope the weather is okay with everyone over there where everyone is situated. I was just telling some of my colleagues that the weather down here in South Florida is looking a little rough. So, if I start to lag or pause, please pardon my internet.
Okay. And then, Isabella, are you adding the slides?
Hey everyone, our slides are just taking a little bit to load. It is processing. Erin, if you want to give it a try, you can. It's just taking a little bit of time on my end. Sorry, everyone.
Let me see.
We're just getting everything loaded up and then we can get started.
Let's see if I can find it real quick.
Hello, I see from sunny San Diego and sunny SoCal. You all are having great weather over there. Will this link be shared with us? This presentation is being recorded, so you will get an email tomorrow with the slides and the recording and a few more links and resources that we'll talk about today.
And yeah, Isabella, it's still processing on my end.
Yeah, it's still processing on my end as well.
Okay.
I think even this initial few minutes, I think we can do it without the slides and wait for them to load while we get started.
Yeah, so Isabella, if you want to just start with just the housekeeping stuff, and then Dorothy and I can start chatting a little bit as we're waiting.
Absolutely. So as Dorothy and Erin said, welcome. We are really excited to get going with you all on this new platform that we're trying today. So thank you for bearing with us. I know we had some emails about the new format. This presentation is being recorded, and then you will get the email tomorrow with the slides and the recording as usual. And then the chat is open, so feel free to make use of that during today's presentation with any questions. And throughout, we'll be keeping an eye on the chat to make sure that we get your questions answered. And then I think I can pass it over to Erin and Dorothy. But in the meantime, feel free to drop what your role is in the chat. We want to hear what everybody is up to in their organization.
And with that, we know that many of you wear multiple hats. So put any roles that you hold. Are you an administrator? Are you a coach? Are you a lead teacher, an educator? If you're also an observer, what all are the different roles that you do? So we have education manager and mentor coach. Mentor coach, ed manager, training director. A lot of infant and toddler specialist, coach, trainer, and observer. So yes, as I mentioned, definitely some dual roles that we see going on here. Okay, so as we have those coming in, oh great, we have slides. All right, so if we can go to slide 5, and then Dorothy and I can do our introductions.
All right, great. Thanks. Thank you, Benjamin. He's behind the scenes getting this started. My name is Dorothy Sanchez. I am part of the content team here at Teachstone. I'm a development lead, and my role is really to make sure that the content that we're creating, so all of the products and services that we're preparing for you all, are relevant, are evidence-based, are responsive to the needs that you all have identified, are really going to strengthen your practices and honor your perspectives and experiences. So I love what I do. I love getting to make sure that what we do is meaningful and impactful for you and the other adults that you work with and the children and families that you work with. And I am based in Miami, Florida, as I said earlier, while everyone was still joining. And our weather is a little funky, so if anything happens to my feed, I apologize about my internet. I'll pass it to
Okay.
Erin.
Well, thank you, Dorothy. And I am Erin Sabina. I am Regional Director for the West. Recently, earlier this year, relocated from the East Coast to the Denver area. So still kind of getting used to what it's like out here in the western portion of the country. So I support many of the states in the West with kind of reviewing where you're at with class. If you haven't begun class usage yet, what is the best implementation process? If you are using class, what can I do to help you improve your class scores, to improve your understanding of class and support through your class journey? Excited to be here with y'all today, and we're going to start off by discussing the importance of instructional coaches. If we can go to the next slide. And so what I want y'all to do is put in the chat here. So if we can go to the next slide again. So I know we talked about a little bit what your role is and that many people wear many different hats. Even just within the role of instructional coach, you may wear many different hats. So what may some of the responsibilities of an instructional coach be? If you can put some of that in the chat here as well.
Yeah,
And Dorothy,
so
you were a coach before, right?
Yes, before I came to Teachstone, I worked as a coach here across Miami-Dade County. So I started as a researcher working with the University of Miami. And what we were doing is really thinking about how to enhance practice-based coaching with other types of coaching that help to increase motivation and help to make sure to increase that self-driven drive for improvement within educators. And so as a coach, I worked with early Head Start, infant and toddler teachers. So I saw some infant toddler specialists here in the chat. And I also worked with Head Start preschool teachers. And that was all over Miami-Dade County. So if you know anything about South Florida, you know that the educators that I had the fortune of working with worked with families from tons of different cultural backgrounds, with many different home languages represented. So we have families who primarily speak Spanish, primarily speak native languages from Mexico and other areas in Central America, or speak Haitian Creole. So we have a ton of different home languages represented. And my main responsibility was to help them plan for their interactions with children based on the goals that they had for children's development. So, for example, if we think about the beginning of the year, a lot of the times we want to make sure that children feel like the classroom is a welcoming environment for them, and we make them feel like they belong. That was the goal that some educators had for children. And so we thought, okay, what are some interactions that can really promote that sense of belonging for children throughout the day? Let's think about how you're going to welcome the children. Let's think about the group activities that you're going to do. Let's think about the free play options that you're going to offer. What are you going to say and do to support that goal that you have for children? So it's really cool that we got to prioritize what educators wanted to focus on with their children and think about it in terms of children's development and what are the interactions that are going to enhance that for children. And another responsibility that of course we all took really, really seriously is that we were kind of a sounding board for educators. So thinking about the other concerns that educators have, helping them to sort of work through those, helping them to manage all of the responsibilities that they have. And we know how overwhelming a lot of those responsibilities can be. And thinking about how to strengthen their communication with families and sharing their observations of children with families. So definitely a lot of hats. It was definitely a really rich, really just really rewarding experience that I got to work as a coach.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm seeing, as I'm going through the chat, a lot of different responses as far as responsibilities that folks are having. And I know, coaching involves more than just class. There's other things that folks are coaching on as well. So part of what we're going to discuss is specific to supporting with class, and some of it's more generalized to how you can really grow folks as coaches and those coaching competencies. So if we can go to the next slide. Great, thank you. So,
and
sorry, go ahead, Dorothy.
oh no, I was just gonna say I'm reading so much of the responses, and there are the responsibilities that a coach might have, or somebody who has a title that's similar to coach, could definitely vary based on the program size that you're working with and the age levels that you all are serving, and definitely the capacity and how many other coaches you all have to work with and what those caseloads are. But we do see a lot of mentoring. We see a lot of making sure to build relationships, helping to promote curriculum usage, feedback, of course, and I love seeing the mention of strength-based and really collaborative partnerships, and making sure that any coaching and feedback work is done in the context of those strong partnerships.
And so there are some key responsibilities for instructional coaches. And I think a lot of what folks are saying in the chat really aligns to what these responsibilities are. So for example, improving teaching practices. I saw some people mentioning doing formal and informal observations. Those help improve teaching practices because you're seeing where the strengths are and where those opportunities for growth are. I saw folks saying training, the interactions aspect. So there's a lot of different supports that these instructional coaches are providing feedback, looking at what goals might be for an individual educator, but also for the broader program as a whole. Anything you want to add to that, Dorothy?
Yeah, and I of course am seeing here, like, we have a lot of different curriculum implementation, and we have the different priorities, like you were saying, Erin, different priorities based on what you all are prioritizing as a program, and then working to make sure that that's still being responsive to educators' individual sort of professional development and growth and journeys there. And then, of course, another key responsibility that we think of a lot is really helping to foster that culture of continuous improvement, and thinking about that growth mindset, and making sure that, like I said before, any feedback and any of that coaching and improvement work is done within the context of a really supportive environment. And so I see a lot of, like, yes, we do so much to support them, to respect our educators, to focus on their strengths, which is all really important when we're thinking about the interactions that help drive improvement, the interactions that help to make sure that educators feel like they are supported and feel like they are in an environment that cares about their growth just as much as we care about the children's growth and development.
I love that. And that goes right into what I was going to say next, as far as, a culture centered on interactions. If some of y'all have seen presentations I've done in the past, I talk a lot about servant leadership. And so the way that you can really create that culture that's centered on interactions is by modeling those same behaviors through the entirety of the program. So Dorothy, are you familiar with what servant leadership is?
I've heard it used a few times, but I would love for you to tell me more about what it means in this context.
Absolutely. So servant leadership is essentially taking what we view as the traditional leadership model, where everybody is kind of working for their boss, and flipping that, where everyone is working for the end user. So it's typically in a business sense, thinking more about the end user as a customer, and the frontline folks, customer support, et cetera. They're all there to support the customer. Their bosses are there to ensure that any sort of barriers are removed, so that those frontline folks can best support the customer, and so on. And the term, again, is servant leadership. And so it's basically the concept of serving those who you lead. So this is flipping that leadership model. And instead of everyone working for their boss or their supervisor, et cetera, they're instead really working for that end user. So in a school setting, that end user is the children. right? So everyone is working for the children. The teachers are there to support the kids. The coaches are then there to support the teachers. Make sure that the teachers are set up for success, that they have everything they need in order to best support the children. The coaches then are looking to their bosses, their directors, whomever, to also provide and model those same interactions. And the more you can do that, do it with coaching, do that parallel process, and think about, like, this is just what human nature is. This is what we as
Yeah.
humans want. We want to feel respected. We want our coach to understand if you're coming in saying, hey, I had this really tough family situation this weekend. Maybe you need to take a moment and pause and talk about that and not jump straight into the coaching, and really honor and respect everyone as individuals.
Yeah. Thanks so much for talking about that. I can hear people sharing some applause, and there's so much interest in the chat about to learn more about what this means in this context for thinking about we're all here to serve the children, and then in doing so, that's how we want to make sure to support those relationships that we have across all these different levels. And somebody put in the chat, thank you for sharing that. She said, I tell my providers that I work for them, not the other way around. And so really thinking about a role of an instructional coach or a mentor or a curriculum specialist or any kind of other specialist, to really think about what can I do to make sure that you have everything you need to better support the children in our care, because that's our priority. Amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Okay, great. If we can go to the next slide, Isabella. And so as we think about that, the instructional coaching has been found to have a greater impact on student outcomes than almost all other school-based interventions. That's where that servant leadership, again, can really come in. It's like, if that instructional coach is modeling those same behaviors with the educator, providing that coaching, providing that one-on-one support. Oh, see, someone's providing a link in here as well. Great, love it. But providing that additional support, that really helps that end user, so to speak, the children. The more that we're all working in lockstep to remove any barriers, create those additional supports to really further those student outcomes. Why do you think the instructional coaching can also lower teacher turnover?
Yeah, I think that when we think about turnover and retention and the sort of the state that we are all in this year, given our context, given our circumstances, given everything that we've all lived through at this point, we think about the needs of, let's think about the children first, right? That we've been talking about. The children in our care need to make sure, or we need to make sure that they feel consistently supported, that they feel like their most basic needs are being addressed. That is what sets the foundation for them to be able to engage in these meaningful learning experiences, right? And we think about all of the additional kinds of support that children have needed throughout these really difficult times. And so it's the same kind of needs that educators and those who support them need, because you can't fill from an empty cup. So it's important that educators also feel like their basic needs are being met, right? Their need to have the structures in place to care for themselves so that they can care for their children. And there's so much that goes into making sure that educators feel respected and that their profession is exactly that, a professional field. And so when we think about more the professionalization of educators, especially early childhood educators, instructional coaching lends to that, right? Making sure that they have the knowledge building in place, making sure that we're giving them the resources to increase their skills as professionals, and that they have the support and the exchanges and the back and forth that they need. When we think about different kinds of roles and different kinds of industries, we think, like, of course, there's always a mentor, there's always somebody that's going to be helping you engage in your professional learning, right? And it's the same thing that educators need. And so instructional coaching can help to make them feel like they are being seen and heard and supported. And we all, like you said, Erin, earlier, we all need that. These are just basic human needs that that we all have.
Exactly. And the more that you're modeling that, the more that those teachers feel, I could do this. I can remember that thing that Dorothy showed me in our coaching session yesterday, and I can model that same behavior with this child. I can do the same stuff and really just creating that consistent sort of interaction. And we know class isn't just about the teacher-child interactions. It's about the entirety of the classroom. So if a teacher and a co-teacher or two lead teachers or what have you, if they're interacting better, then that helps with the entirety of the classroom. So having that cohesion, that consistency. Maslow's pyramid, I talk about that a lot as well. You have to Maslow before you can bloom, right? I love that phrase.
Yeah, exactly. And in the same way that we think about having like creating an environment that welcomes and supports every child, it's creating an environment where each teacher feels safe enough to try these new things out, to apply what they're learning, to take these kinds of risks, and to engage in this kind of growth relationship in a way that doesn't feel punitive, right? And so thinking like, and we say all the time, every teacher can benefit from a coach. Every one of us in our professions can benefit from some extra guidance. So it's not just thinking about, okay, somebody is receiving coaching because they have an XYZ kind of need. Everyone is receiving coaching because this is the kind of growth that we are all committing to for ourselves and for the children in our care.
Absolutely. Okay, and Isabella, if we can move on to the next one as well. So I listened to this podcast a couple years ago that was a manager tools podcast, and it talked about feedback, and it was really interesting. I've never forgotten this analogy. They talked about feedback in terms of being like driving a car, and you don't wait until you're going into a ditch before you make a correction, right? You're constantly making little adjustments to the wheel so that you stay the course. And it's the same thing with feedback. You can't wait until somebody's really struggling to say, hey, let's work on this because you're really not doing great in this area, or you're doing fantastic, but I haven't mentioned it for the past couple of months, but I just want you to know now. You want to constantly be validating, constantly be giving that constructive feedback as well, and not waiting until you're way off course and trying to course correct. So I think about that with this quote here about building that environment of constructive feedback, not just constructive, but also that positive feedback, and knowing that if you are saying, hey, Dorothy, can I give you some feedback? You're not always going to think, oh God, what did I do? Because you're getting that constant feedback and you know that it's going to be a good experience.
Yeah. And I appreciate the conversation about what are those key conditions for success here, and what are the structures that we need in place to make sure that our coaches are being successful in the way that they work with teachers, in the same way that we think, okay, what do our teachers need and what do our educators need to make sure that they are maximizing the impact of their interactions, right? And so I love all of the conversations that are being had now around what do we need to make sure is in place? What are going to be the things that contribute to successful coaching and effective partnerships?
Okay, next slide, Isabella. So I think exactly what you were just saying, Dorothy. How do we help coaches thrive, right? Next slide.
Yeah, and so like we said, it's all about the ways that everyone can benefit from guidance, from strengthening your skills, from continuous learning, right? We never stop being learners. And so coaches also, and people in coaching roles also need the opportunity to strengthen their knowledge and skills. And when I think about coaching, I think about it in as sort of three prongs. And so I think about the content that coaches need to feel comfortable in to be able to have these really productive conversations with educators. So I think, okay, they really need to feel comfortable talking about children's development. They need to feel comfortable talking about interactions, right? We think about class, of course, and think about development to the appropriate practices. And so the more that we provide opportunities for coaches to learn and to be really fluent in this kind of language and class language and interactions language, and learning about what children need and how to make sure that we're providing for those needs, the more confident coaches can be in their conversations with educators and helping educators generate ideas of what to do and what to say to support children's development. So thinking about content and knowledge as being a really key piece of coaching. And then another piece that I think about a lot is that approach and how a coach approaches their interactions with their educators and the people that they're working with. And so I think about coaching competencies and the competencies that they have when it comes to the feedback conversations that we're having, right? How are we building educators' skills, like this third point, in providing that kind of feedback? How are we strengthening coaches' abilities to observe, right? That's a competency as well. Objectively observing, making sure to note the educators' interactions and how children are responding and then interpreting that. What does that mean? And so then we have content that we need to make sure that we are thinking about. We need to make sure that coaches are being supported in their skills and competencies. And we also need to make sure that coaches have a really good understanding of what to do and helping them understand the process of coaching and what is it that they need to, what are the steps they need to engage in when we think about continuous quality improvement. What are even some of those logistical things that can tend to be these big barriers when we think about, right, where do I document all of this? Where do I make sure that I'm aligning what my teachers are doing to what the program is doing, right? So that's how I think of coaching, these three things: content, approach, and process. And I see in the chat here that there are very little PDs on coaching, and there are fewer options when we think about, okay, how do we promote these adult to adult learning experiences in an educational setting? So it's important to think about that and prioritize that for your coaches and build coach capacity so that they have the confidence and the structures in place to be able to do all of these things that we've been talking about, right? Servant leadership and providing effective feedback, and creating those supportive relationships with educators.
I love this one comment in the chat that I want to read right now. Prior to coaching, I have the teachers complete a personality true color assessment in order to learn how to provide feedback to a particular person. The educators certainly appreciate the fact that I care how they feel prior to our coaching sessions. They're more receptive to the feedback. And I love that because that to me goes back to, I think, Dorothy, when we were preparing for this webinar, I mentioned the platinum rule. So if anyone in the chat is familiar with what the platinum rule is, I'd love to see what you have to say about that. But it also makes me think about the book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And it's really the same thing with adults as well. You have to understand the other person. There you go. I got that answer right here. Treat others the way they want to be treated. So golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. I was doing a presentation a couple years ago, and a participant said that to me when I said the golden rule. And that to me was just this aha moment of, yes, that is exactly it. We need to focus on the other person that we're communicating with, the person we're providing feedback to, the person that we're coaching, and how do they want to be treated? What are their needs? And really individualizing that.
That's so important, especially thinking about ways to prioritize being more culturally responsive and being more equitable in the way that we think about coaching and improvement and the resources that we provide for folks, and thinking about, okay, what are the ways that I'm interacting with this person that honors how they want to be spoken to, viewed in, what light they want to be viewed in. So I love that, especially thinking about promoting more equitable interactions when it comes to coaching and PD.
Absolutely. So I know folks were saying in the chat how there's not a lot of supports out there for coaches. I hope you all are here to be excited about some of the supports that we do provide to help coach your coach. Absolutely. The main difference is that golden rule is self-centric and platinum rule is other-centric. And ideally, especially when we're thinking about interactions, we should always be other-focused, not at the detriment of ourselves, but always just thinking about how can we support others? What are we capable of providing?
And Erin, I have to add, thinking about this parallel process, right? When we're talking with educators about children's social emotional development, especially infant and toddler educators, we think when we're first starting out our relationships with infants, it's really, centered on them and who they are, and they're exploring themselves and they're learning about who they are, right? So it's very me. And then as they grow into toddlerhood and preschool developmental levels, we start thinking, okay, how do we take them from that me to we, and really helping support them and understanding what others might be experiencing and what their friends might be feeling. So I love that also parallel process connection of thinking like that's the same thing that we want to be doing, right? We want to be thinking, we want to be thinking about the others that we're working with, and the peers that we have, our peers and the people that we're responsible for mentoring.
Absolutely. Okay, so Isabella, if we can go to the next slide, we're going to talk about how folks can strengthen their class knowledge. So Dorothy, I heard you mention when we talk about strengthening your class knowledge about always be learning. One of my favorite quotes, I don't know if you've ever heard this one, is the moment you think you have nothing left to work on, you need to work on your humility. So everybody always has some room for growth, some opportunity for so I said that on a webinar one time, and someone asked me if they could use that and attribute it to me, because I don't know who said it initially. So now some school has that quote, Erin, Sabina, on their wall.
That is such an honor.
I was like, you can absolutely put my name on. That's great. So it's constantly this room for growing, for improving your own competencies. I hear some cheers too. I love this. But the more that you can grow yourself, the more that you're able to then grow others and support others in developing those skill sets. And so one of the things we can do here is help your coaches strengthen their class knowledge in a way that is also then strengthening the class knowledge of your educators. So we have two kind of parallel offerings here. One is our initial version, and then the other is our updated version with second edition that you can register for now. The first sessions take place in October. But essentially in this, what you're doing is you're getting trained on how to deliver a formal class group coaching model. So you're coaching a group of educators at one time. You're getting an in-house class expert who has been trained to deliver this coaching and then is providing this to your educators in cohorts. It's 20 plus hours of content. And then they're getting support and feedback to improve those coaching skills along the way as well. So they're providing this coaching, they're sharing feedback back to Teachstone, to class specialists, getting feedback on their coaching, and really developing themselves as class coaches and themselves with their class knowledge as they're providing this kind of deep dive into the various dimensions of class to their educators. And I don't know if she's on this call right now, but a former partner of mine that I worked with who was a class group coach, still is a class group coach, said to me one time that she is so passionate about this offering that she believes that any teacher who is ever going to be observed with the class tool should go through this coaching model and really get that deep understanding of the dimensions. So I love what it does for the educators, but it also does great support for the coaches themselves in understanding and strengthening their class knowledge.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm not surprised to hear that there's a lot of love for these offerings, because like folks were saying in the chat, there aren't as many opportunities for coaches as there are for educators, but it's also important to kind of bridge those two, and make sure that you're prioritizing building your coaches capacity and knowledge, and then making sure that you're supporting them in spreading that knowledge and using those skills to the educators, and especially making sure to prepare educators for the things that are coming up, making sure that they feel, again, supported and feel like they're being prioritized in the process too. So I love that it's working on a lot of the different components of coaching that we talked about.
I see someone said it's very important for the teachers to understand what class is asking of them, especially instructional support. And absolutely. So we have a focus, measure, improve framework for that purpose because it's so important not only to improve practice, but also to focus the educators on what is class. We know it can be daunting, especially how many notes observers come in and they're taking, and just understanding what is class, what are we looking at, and this is really what you're already doing. We're not looking for any sort of crazy interactions, any sort of crazy changes in behavior, but it's what best practice is and what you're already doing. So I love that we have to really ground them on what class is. Okay. And then, Dorothy, did you have anything to add, or are we ready for the next slide?
I just want to say that like you said, class group coaching and then the updated fun new version of Interaction Essentials trainer program. Interaction Essentials is going to be starting in October. So we're really excited about releasing this and really thinking about we were very intentional about the ways that we carried over a lot of the strengths and the things that people love about class group coaching into Interaction Essentials and making sure that that is still shining through, but enhancing the ways that we are presenting this content to coaches and to educators.
Absolutely. I love that. Okay. And I see some folks too talking about more of an intentional focus on coaching from OHS as well. And does the group coaching also provide class observer certificate? Great question. It does not. Instead, being a class observer is a prerequisite for attending this. And so where can we learn more and possibly sign up for class group coaching? Also a great question. We'll be providing contact information at the end. Isabella, I don't know if you want to drop the link in right now as well, but you can reach out to whomever your class rep is for your area. We'll provide a link that you can fill out a form and get connected to your point of contact to discuss any questions, any feedback, and just get connected to who your rep is to have that dedicated point of contact here at Teachstone.
Yeah. And something that I also want to add here is that we know that coaching is, like people are saying, much more intentional focus. And we know that a lot of programs, a lot of you are from Head Start programs and know a lot about practice-based coaching. And the really cool thing about a lot of our coaching offerings is that they align so well with practice-based coaching. Practice-based coaching is making sure that you are focusing in on a goal and making sure you're conducting those observations and then providing feedback. And those are all the practices that our coaching offerings also support. So it aligns really well with practice-based coaching efforts.
Okay, great. So Isabella, if we can go to the next slide. So I saw some folks also talking about how there's not a lot out there that supports with the actual adult learning principles and how do we really support with those coaching competencies. So we do have a 2-year program that focuses more so on what makes an effective coach. How do you really deliver coaching? How do you have those competencies that help drive adult interactions? And during that time, you're receiving, again, individualized support and feedback from Teachstone so that you're really learning how to be a really strong coach and enhancing those skill sets. I had also seen in the chat, somebody mentioned they were excited about video coaching, video supports. We offer a model like that as well. It's our class one-on-one video coaching where you're building those class-based competencies through a 3-day training, but then you're exploring those within your coaching program with your educators. You're exploring those strategies for common coaching challenges. So basically, they're recording themselves in the classroom. You as the coach are then editing that video, breaking it down into shorter bite-sized chunks where you're focusing on specific interactions and giving a strengths-based approach to say, hey, look at these moments that you did really great. Here's the dimension it aligns to. Here's the domain, and here's what you're already doing. How can we make more of this? And again, they're receiving coaching from Teachstone along the way. So we're trying to provide that support where your coaches are supporting your educators, but Teachstone is also supporting your coaches in developing.
That's great. We know that video is so powerful. And when I was engaging in my coaching work before coming to Teachstone, we also used videos to help educators help them with their observation skills. So practice observing children and the ways that children were responding to their interactions, and the ways that the educators were prompting their thinking, and the ways that educators were providing these experiences for them. So it was really fun to get teachers and educators to hone in on those effective moments, and really start to help them see themselves as these effective professionals, right? A lot of the times when you're watching yourself on video, it can get a little bit awkward. And so it's so helpful to have somebody there that's guiding you and focusing you in on, actually, no, let's look at this really, really special moment. What did you observe the child doing? What did you do that helped the child accomplish this thing that you had been helping him to be able to do? So video is so, so powerful.
Fantastic. Let's see. So if we can go on to the next slide as well. So we can also refine feedback strategies. So with this, we're talking about just that constant ongoing feedback, but also how do you do so using the class framework as your guide? Again, that parallel process. So how do you provide feedback that uses that framework with feedback loops, that is developing concepts, giving the teachers autonomy a little bit to give their own feedback as well. So we have a one-day training where coaches learn a framework for those feedback loops, and how to best conduct a feedback session using our feedback framework. I've heard really, really great, I was going to say feedback again, but really, really great responses to folks who have attended our feedback strategies training. And then also exploring new strategies to differentiate feedback based on teacher readiness. So I love that. That goes back to what we were saying about, like, what is the teacher's feedback style? And you need to honor and respect where the educator is in their process, because if you're really hitting them with a lot all at once, it's natural to kind of shut down, to be overwhelmed, to not be as receptive to that feedback. So having those strategies to understand where the person that you're speaking to is at and where you should be providing the feedback, starting small and building on that, scaffolding the feedback. And so I see some applause and some hearts coming through with that. Dorothy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think I think that the feedback strategies, I know I've also heard a lot of love for that training, and I think it's a very great way to prime coaches for the rest of their coaching responsibilities and things that they've got to do. And we've talked so much about how to be responsive to educators, and so having different ways to be able to do that is great.
And then in addition to feedback, we know the most challenging domain of the class tool. Everyone that says that I need to work on just one area, instructional support strategies. So you may know that we have a training that's specific to educators with instructional support, but if you want to support your coaches with how can you really empower your coaches to coach your educators on this challenging domain, we do have an instructional support strategies for coaches training. This again is a one-day training to help you really understand what are effective instructional support interactions and how can you support your teachers? How can you do some role play activities and other strategies in your professional development work with the educators to really ensure that you're maximizing and showcasing instructional support? Also, how can you use parallel process? How can you use those same instructional support strategies in your coaching that you want the educators to be doing with the children?
Yeah, I think that this one is pretty special as well because of what you said, Erin, like that parallel process. And the majority of our coaching offerings are aligned with coaching competencies to strengthen coach skills. But this one is a great one to highlight because it's really all about making sure to promote that thinking in educators as well, and that creativity and the same things that we want to promote in children, to strengthen their thinking skills. It's the same kind of reflective practices that we want to promote in educators so that they can continue to engage in that kind of growth mindset and reflective thinking, even when we're not there having these conversations there with them, right? We can't always be there having these reflective conversations with our educators. So how do we make sure to give them those skills so that they can continue to engage in that kind of thinking without us?
Absolutely. And so we talked about the coaches and what the coaches can be doing. So Dorothy, can you tell us a little bit about what leaders can do? And Isabella, if you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, so in the chat, we saw that there are a lot of folks with us today that are directors or executive directors or are in leadership positions, and you are in a great position to provide the structures and opportunities to build your coaches' capacities. So it is really helpful for you to be able to provide a way for coaches to strengthen their skills and knowledge and help them become certified in an evidence-based coaching framework, in a way that they can promote continuous growth and improvement with educators that aligns with what research has been telling us about adult learning principles and ways to promote that continuous growth. And you all as leaders play a really pivotal role in shaping what the interactions are going to be like within your early learning systems and within your early childhood settings. And so it's important for you to make sure to provide those ongoing opportunities for coaches to build and strengthen their skills, right? Coaches are mentors, and they also need those kind of mentorship opportunities and this kind of feedback, and these opportunities to engage in exchanges and trainings and back and forths with others who are engaging in this work as well. One thing that I love about these kinds of opportunities is that there's so much sharing of knowledge happening in the chat. There's so much that other coaches are sharing, other ways that you are supporting folks that you don't typically get to interact with. So it's important to provide those spaces for coaches as well to be able to engage in that kind of thought sharing, and knowledge building. As leaders, it's important for you to give educators the time and the space to take advantage of the ways that you're building coach capacity. So if you are investing in all of these ways to promote skills and knowledge for coaches, make sure that there's a way for educators to benefit from that too. So are there ways you can restructure some schedules to make sure that educators can have one-on-one time with their coaches, that they can have these small group opportunities with their coaches that are really conducive to these reflective conversations and getting teachers to think more deeply about what they're going to do with children and how they can build their own skills. And then lastly, another thing that we've talked a lot about today is encouraging these frequent informal observations that feel safe and feel approachable. So making sure that this kind of cycle of goal setting and observations and feedback is part of the coaching process that you're having your coaches engage in, and making sure that it is responsive, making sure that it is a safe place for educators to take those risks, right? That it's not punitive, that they're not being constantly evaluated in a way that makes them feel like they're constantly being tested, but rather these observations are so we all align on what are you doing that is already promoting all of these wonderful skills for children, and then where do we go from here, and where do we grow from here? So it's really important that leaders commit to making sure to provide the structures that coaches need to be successful, because we can build coaches' knowledge and skills all day long, but what are we doing to make sure that we're taking out any challenges and obstacles that they may have on the way, right? Thinking about servant leadership, like you said, Erin, how can I remove obstacles from your path so that you are as successful as you possibly can be in service of the children?
Absolutely. And I think also, I love that part about the informal observations being approachable, because I know the formal observations can be very nerve-wracking. And so those informal observations being more frequent, again, that more frequent feedback can help make those formal observations a little bit less stressful, because it's like, okay, I've already done this. I have this feedback. I know what I'm doing. I feel confident right now. So those individual
Yeah.
touch points along the way can help with that. Or
Yeah,
intimidating,
absolutely.
hopefully not intimidating.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, Erin, if it's frequent, right, it's part of what we do here. It's just part of our ways of being that we're coming in, that I'm coming in, sitting down for just a few minutes, right, one activity or a few different minutes of exchanges with different children, right, just thinking in a way that feels approachable. So it's quick, it's easy, it's focused in on something that you are prioritizing with that educator. And then, of course, you always give feedback around that observation, right? It's no fun if somebody comes to observe you and then you never hear from them or you have no idea what they saw or what they think about what they saw, or you have questions about things that happened during that observation. So approachable, accessible, making sure that it's connected to all of the other improvement offerings or improvement efforts that you've got going on.
Absolutely. I see that somebody has their hand up requesting to speak. I'm not sure that we have that capability. So if you want, just put your question in the chat and then we'll be able to see it. Just wanted to put that out there before we move on to the next slide here. Isabel, so if you can move to the next slide, Dorothy and I are going to tie it all together. So the end goal here, we said from the beginning, is better child outcomes, right? How do we really get those better child outcomes? And we went through a couple different things here. So we have, and yes, we do have a template for formal and informal observations. Sorry for the quick aside, I just saw that chat. We do have a template that's in the CLC, we can provide that. But tying it all together for those better child outcomes, culture of interactions. So it's not just what interactions are taking place in the classroom, but what interactions are taking place through the entirety of your program. When you see folks in the hallway, when you're in your coaching meetings, when you're in all these various settings, what is the overall culture of your program and the interactions that are taking place? Ongoing coaching opportunities. You want to make sure that there's that ongoing opportunity for support, for additional learning. And part of that is with strong data-driven feedback loops, the continuous investment in learning. And then as Dorothy was mentioning, that leadership support and that commitment is so important, because if you don't have that commitment to the coaching, providing those opportunities for teachers to step away, that makes it harder for those opportunities to take place. We really want to make sure that those opportunities are as at the forefront as possible. I know that can be challenging, especially with staffing and not being able to take people out of classrooms. So however you're able to make those opportunities, and we're always happy to brainstorm ideas as well. If you reach out to us about what are some kind of smaller bite-sized chunks of learning that maybe you can just take 5, 10, 15 minutes here and there, do something quick and be able to then get that learning in instead of needing a couple hours or a whole day or 2 days to do the trainings.
Yeah, that ties back to what you started with here in the culture of interactions, Erin, and saying even those quick conversations that you have in the hallway, even those 5-minute touch points that you might have once a week, even if it doesn't feel like an intensive coaching conversation where you get to talk about all of the things that you want to talk about, all of that work is coaching and improvement efforts. All of that drives improvement. All of that is contributing to that foundation that you've built with your educator, that partnership. You need exactly all you need is 30 minutes. Even a 5-minute, 10-minute conversation can be really impactful if it's driven through those competencies, making sure that you're prioritizing what educators want to talk about, making sure that you're providing feedback in the way that they want to receive the feedback, and all in service, like we said, of the children, really relevant to what it is that they're doing. So yes, I love that. Even though, of course, everyone could benefit from those really intensive, rich, complex conversations, coaching can happen in those frequent touch points, and in a really approachable ways, especially for those of you that have really large caseloads, right? I've heard so many stories from coaches who are responsible for over 60 classrooms when they're working with larger agencies, right? It's impossible for them to be able to have really intensive conversations with all of their educators, but thinking about what are those little touch points that I can provide to help drive educators' motivation, to provide some kind of data-driven feedback. even if that data is really thinking about what questions can I ask the educator so that they can give me some of their observations of the classroom, some of their thinking and their insights. How can I respond to those?
Great. So, oh, Isabel, if you can go to the next slide. I know we only have a couple minutes left here. Dorothy and I have tried to answer questions along the way through the chat. I do see that there are two people with their hand up requesting to speak. Again, I don't know that we have that capability. So if you can put your questions in the chat if you have specific questions. And then also, Isabella, are there any questions that you made note of along the way that Dorothy and I did not respond to or that you weren't able to respond to in the chat along the way? I see Isabella joining us.
I'm back. I've been busy in the chat. I'm looking for the now. But if you have any questions about today's content, feel free to drop that in the chat. Okay, first, is the training available after it is over? I want to address today's session because I've seen that question come up a lot today. Yes, this was recorded and you can just pop back in here to see today's session. But as for the other stuff, I'm going to pass that over to Erin and Dorothy.
So the trainings would not be, if you attended one of our coaching trainings, those would not be available after it's over as far as the training content itself, the supports, and some other portions of it. Yes, that'll be available. But since the training is a live training, sometimes in person, sometimes virtually delivered, there's not like a available support, like overall training recording or anything like that. But there's, for example, with class group coaching, there's a village that you would get on your dashboard with additional supports. You'd have the meetings with the class specialists. So you'd have other things that are ongoing supports after you walk out of the training for many of the ones we discussed today. Some, like feedback strategies and instructional support strategies, are more so like a one and done. You attended the training, now you go implement them. But others that require that ongoing support have that ongoing support.
Okay.
Yeah, like Erin said, oh yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna say, like Erin said, the materials for the different trainings that you would attend would be available depending on what you have chosen, what you engaged in, the village. Once you are part of those training opportunities, our affiliate villages and our learning resources are pretty comprehensive.
We have a few other questions. First, regarding these trainings, do you have to travel?
So I was in the middle of typing a response. I will say that response out loud as well. The answer is no, you do not have to travel. We actually don't really even offer that offering anymore like we used to. So instead, these trainings are either delivered virtually, or if they're face-to-face, we travel to you and provide the training to you and your organization.
Awesome. Yes, super convenient. We had another question that I saw before all the thank you started coming in. So can you clarify if there's a difference between being MMCI CGC certified, so class group coaching, to offer to educators, and the classroom coaching you spoke of that seems to be for coaches with other coaches?
So wait, let me go back to read this exact question because I want to, I don't see where that one is, but MMCI, oh, there it is. Okay. Difference between being MMCI certified educators and class group coaching. So no, the class group coaching that we spoke with is what you're referencing, the MMCI CGC. So that's what we were referencing was the initial training, which takes place with other coaches. And then from there, you also go back to your program and deliver that coaching to the educators. So it's a two-part to the training and the coaching themselves. But what we were referencing is the MMCI CGC certification and also Interactions Essentials for Educators, which is a new offering available in October. You can register now, but it's our update with second edition.
Great, thank you. Well, we are basically at the end of time here. And for those of you who have attended sessions with us in the past, we want to clarify something. This would normally be the part of the show where I drop a link in to reach out to a representative. But today we're actually going to take on that work for you. So you don't have to fill out a form. We'll just be reaching out to you in the next couple of days so that you can speak with somebody if needed. As I mentioned before, you could just go back to the link and the recording will be here for you to watch it at your convenience. And then we'll also be emailing you some resources just for registering. So thank you all so much. We hope you enjoyed it, and we appreciate how active you were in the chat.
And real quick, I saw a couple questions about pricing. Reach out. Pricing varies depending on offering. So just reach out to us and we'll be able to discuss pricing with you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you. And then there are a ton of free resources that Isabella shared in the chat. Our podcasts, we have our blog. There are other articles that we've posted that also talk about coaching and different ways that you can support your educators, and as a leader, as you can support your coach.
Yes, so definitely check out the links. And if you go on to Teachstone's website, teachstone.com/resources, you will be able to find just a whole library of free offerings that you can pass on to your team. I'm dropping the link in the chat now, as well as the podcast, the blog, as Dorothy mentioned, various printouts and things like that. So we have lots of stuff for you there.
Dorothy, there's a question that came in Spanish. I don't know if you, I can tell that they want to see it in Spanish, I think it says. En algún lugar puede.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, somebody's asking if they can see, I believe, this content in Spanish.
Okay.
And I know that we do have several resources that are available in Spanish. I don't know whether this particular webinar is available in Spanish, but if you want more information, we have reps who can assist you in Spanish. So si tiene alguna pregunta en español, pues nosotros tenemos representantes que pueden hablar con usted en español y que le pueden orientar a diferentes productos que tenemos en español y diferentes recursos, porque sí tenemos muchos recursos disponibles en español.
And if this needs to be translated to Spanish, we can get today's presentation in Spanish on YouTube.
Amazing.
So thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. That's time for today. But if you have any other questions, remember, we will be reaching out to you. So please just get in contact with that rep. You can also do that on our website, teachstone.com, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank y'all.